Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video we are going to be discussing the demand curve. Okay, we are discussing the demand curve. Now in the previous video we discussed the meaning of demand, we discussed the factors or the determinants of demand, and we discussed just three determinants there. If you haven't seen that video, you can go back and check that video out. Okay, but in this video we are only interested in the demand curve and the kind of changes that can happen with the demand curve. So first thing we can look at here is we are going to be talking about the demand curve, what it means. Now what is the demand curve? Now, the demand curve is a diagram that tells you or shows you the relationship between the price of a product and the quantity that consumers will purchase at different prices. So basically, the demand curve shows you the relationship between quantity demanded and price. Okay, now because of the law of demand, which says the higher the price of a product, the lower the quantity that will be demanded, and then the opposite, which is the lower the price of the product, the higher the quantity that will be demanded. This has already established a negative relationship between demand and price. So the demand curve is going to have what? A negative slope. So if the demand curve is having a negative slope, this is how the demand curve looks like. So the demand curve will have on the y-axis, the demand curve is going to have what we call the price of the product. And let me put the price here in dollars. And then on the x-axis, you're going to have the quantity demanded, and then point of origin is usually 0. So the demand curve can be drawn using a straight line or a curved line. Whichever the case, the demand curve slopes downward from left to right. So this is the demand curve. So we can easily identify any coordinate here, like points on the curve, and target point A and point B. So we can trace the coordinates to the quantity axis and to the price axis, and do the same for the other points and trace it here to the price axis. So if we have this in dollar, I call this $5 and $3, and then I call this 50 units, and then I call this let's say 75 units. So this is the demand curve. So let's call this as the demand for rice. So this is the demand for rice. As we can see from the diagram, the demand curve slopes downward from left to right, which indicates that as the price of the product goes down, the quantity demanded by the consumer goes up. On the flip side, as the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. So this is what we mean by the negative slope, because it slopes downward, telling us about the negative relationship between the price of a product and the quantity demanded of that product. So here we have it, the demand curve. Now, since we already understand the demand curve, the next thing we are going to look at in this video is about the kind of changes that we can have when it comes to demand. Okay, the kind of changes we can have when it comes to demand. So I will have this here, and we call this the first kind of change we can have with demand is known as movement. What we call the movement along a demand curve. Okay, now with the movement along a demand curve, the only thing that is causing a movement along a demand curve is the price of a product. Okay, so this is caused by what? The price of a product, or we can say price changes. So when we have a change in the price of the product, then we are going to have a movement along a demand curve. That means one particular demand diagram, we have a movement from one point to the other. So like what we have here, this represents a movement along the demand curve from one point to the other or vice versa. So the only reason we are having a movement along this curve is because we have the price going up or down. If the price go up, the quantity demanded goes down, and if the price go down, then the quantity demanded goes up. So this is what we mean by a movement along a demand curve. Take note, when it comes to a movement along a demand curve, we are going to have a single demand curve for a particular product, and then the demand curve will move, or there will be a movement in the points from one point on the demand curve to another. And the only reason or the only thing causing that movement is called what? A change in the price of the product. Okay? Now, when it comes to the second part here, which is also very, very important, we call this second part, we call it a shift of the demand curve. So the demand curve can actually make a shift. The demand curve can shift. So we call this a shift along the demand curve. So what are the things that leads to shift of the demand curve? So like I have here the causes, or what is caused by. So I'll bring it down. So what can cause a shift along the demand curve? So many other factors affecting demand, but it can never be the price of the product. So when it comes to a shift, we're referring to changes in the market size of a particular product. So if the market size of a product change, then we are going to have what? A shift of the demand curve. So what we have here goes this way. We have things that can cause a shift as maybe the income of the consumer. Also, things that can cause a shift could be taxation. Things that can cause a shift could also be the price of other product or price of related products. Okay. Also, things that can cause a shift could be population or even weather conditions. Okay, so all these other factors affecting demand, when they change, it's going to give us or lead to a shift along the demand curve. So how does the shift along the demand curve looks like? So this is what we call a shift. Okay, so normally we have our quantity demanded, 0, and then we have the price given in dollar. So you will notice that the price does not cause a change here. So we have a particular demand curve drawn, and we can signify it by calling it D1. Okay, we can use numbers or we can use letter depending on exactly what you feel you want to make use of. And then you draw another one known as what? D2. Okay, we can draw a third one, but let's end with this. And then we have D1 and D2. What we have here says that the price remains the same. So if we have the price here, if we trace the line, you see the price has not changed yet. So if the price has not changed, what else has changed? In this case, this line is not straight. So I'll try to make it straight. So what we have here is that the demand curve has shifts. Okay, it shifts from one point to the other. It can go upward or it can come back downward. So let's assume this is set from D1 down to D2. So let's assume that the demand curve move or shifts to the right or upward. So if we have this will be an increase in the amount of goods and services bought for a particular product. So notice that the price of the product has remained the same. However, the amount of goods bought has changed from we use the same number there from 50 units down to 75 units. So we can see that there is an increase in quantity demanded. So what are the things that might have caused this increase in quantity demanded? It is simply because all these factors, maybe the income has increased. So the more income the consumer have, the more money the consumer will have to spend on the product, and therefore the consumer will be able to buy more. And therefore, irrespective of the change in the price, irrespective of the price, or let's say the price hasn't changed, price remain constant. However, because the consumer has more money, the consumer now is able to buy more products. On the other hand, with taxation, it works the opposite, because taxation, from the previous video we said, we concluded that taxation has a negative relationship when it comes to the demand for a particular product. So therefore, when taxation, income tax per se goes up, then the amount of money available to the consumer will reduce, and that will reduce the demand for the particular product. And then with population, it is positive. So if the number of persons demanding or needing this product increase, or the number of persons that needs the product will be bought for increase, then what you have is that the demand goes up. So thank you so much for being with me. If you like this video or find this video helpful, please uh, click on the like button and the subscribe button as well to grow my channel. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.